Oh my gosh, this is Trey Ford, and I was right, I didn't misremember. He's the global security strategist for Rapid7, so I'm like, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you weren't here yesterday, Trey, so he doesn't know how scared to be of me embarrassing him, because my kind of thing was, bring someone up and tell some story of how I first met him. I just want to let you guys know that Trey really almost just barely made it here to the conference, and I'm so thankful that he's here. He had all kinds of transit issues getting here, but he pushed through it, and he made it out here last night, and I'm really glad that you're here, and we're really excited to hear this talk, because it's going to be something, again, on the, something that it's going to be on the, for me, a little bit less on the quantitative side, which is helpful for me, and about communication. So without further ado, please go forward. Thanks, Trey.
What is our target stop time?
1:30.
1:30.
Yeah, if we can get done with the presentation questions, 1:30.
Awesome, okay. Well, I want to thank you for having me. Very excited to be here in the post-lunch slot. It's highly coveted, so I'll try to keep tones very flat so you guys can get a good nap in. My name's Trey Ford. I recently joined Rapid7, started about, I'm not real good at math, the end of January, so call it 9 months. My role is that of a strategist or an advocate. One of my favorite parts of this job is that it continues the core passion of what I was doing before at Black Hat. I ran Black Hat for a couple of years, and what I found interesting was how very misunderstood cybersecurity is. Anyone gonna yell drink? Information security is widely misunderstood. I rode my motorcycle over the last couple of weeks all over the Midwest of the United States, up into Arkansas, across Oklahoma, and back around up to Indianapolis. Indianapolis? It wasn't Indianapolis. Louisville. I was there for DerbyCon. Stopping in little diners along the way, and you meet these really old ladies and gentlemen that run their restaurants, and you're talking to them, so what do you do, young man? Well, I work in information security. Well, what's that? And I'm like, well, I'm a hacker. Oh, why do you, is that legal? All right, that's not the right way to describe what we do. Maybe we go a different direction. Well, I work in cybersecurity. Man, that's gotta be hard work. It sounds like you guys aren't doing a very good job. That's probably fair. Pretty tough. So what I wanna talk with you guys today about is executive reporting. It's no surprise, we all see the news, that there's a lot of incidents happening, a lot of things making the headlines, and I think we share something in common. It's hard to talk about. Now, we'll talk a little bit about some of the cognitive biases, some of the challenges we face, not just when meeting random strangers or picking up guys or girls at the bar or talking to our significant others, describing what it is we do. It's hard to talk about in the boardroom. What I'd like to cover is boardroom disciplines, like to speak very briefly about, a simple comparison about where we are in the relative maturity of our industry compared to other disciplines that we face, challenges that our executives face, and perhaps some of the things that we make it harder for them by doing ourselves. And then I want to share some anecdotal thoughts from some conversations I had back in June, and then propose something of a framework, not necessarily a standard. Turns out we're running short on standards, frameworks, auditors to tell us how to do our jobs, that kind of important thing. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Boardroom disciplines. Quick show of hands, how many of you guys have been in InfoSec more than 5 years? I'm going to use cybersecurity interchangeably. How about cybersecurity more than 10 years? 15? 20? 25? I'm going to call BS. So depending on how we define this and how pragmatic we want to be, this is a young industry. Now I'm going to go back to very simple terms because I'm a simple guy. Depending on what boardroom you walk into, when you look around and talk to other people in the room, you're probably talking to engineers, definitely accountants, most likely lawyers, and what I've missed, did I say doctors? In engineering. Turns out these disciplines run all the way back from, I don't know, as soon as man could count, we had accounting, and then arguing over what the count was, so then we had law. So anytime we started exerting influence in any of these spaces, we started to see a profession forming. Now what's great about this is they started teaching this in the very first universities. Universities started popping up around what? 900 Common Era-ish? Bologna, they range from 9 to 1100 for the very earliest ivory tower education. Now what's great about that is this notion of being a board certified physician or nurse Or a lawyer that's passed the bar? When did that happen, where you were accredited by your peers as a professional that had a clue-ish? When? 1930s, give or take? So that's great. I mean, following common history, we should have another 900 years or so before we organize ourselves as a profession, right? Maybe, maybe not. So again, we're going to go back to math. I'm massively intimidated speaking with you guys. I'm afraid of quants. I try to fancy myself a math person. I'm not. You guys know what these things are? I'm sure you know what the left is, a cash register. Anybody know what's on the right? It's a punch card tabulator. Before IBM reincorporated as International Business Machines, it was known as the Computing, Recording, Tabulating Company or something to this effect. It was terrible. And so they reincorporated in 1911, and this is kind of where they came from. They held the contract for the US Census, and so this is how they would calculate this. Now, I'm not going to go through an attack tree or do any threat modeling on these devices. The register's pretty straightforward. Perhaps the machine that helps me count, because I'm bad at math, is probably fairly straightforward, but I don't think it was being manipulated in quite the same way. So when we start comparing security executives going to talk to the boardroom against some of these age-old disciplines, we face a significant challenge. We're making it up as we go. Now, I'm standing here humbly and actually in a certain level of terror because I'm going to explore a couple of thoughts that I think are cogent. I think they're humbling a little bit, but at the same time, I'm afraid to be speaking before Jack Jones, so I'm pretty sure he's going to mop me up afterwards, and I'm looking forward to it greatly. But my point is this: when you talk to your CSO, they all kind of have a strategy, and when you talk to multiple CSOs, they all have different strategies. Am I right? How many of you have watched a new CSO come in the door and they roll out a couple of their prior architects and trusted employees, certainly their favorite technologies, and a whole new strategy on reporting and communication? This is a challenge. Now, what's interesting to me is I'm trying to sort out where this data comes from. We've all done this report. In this room, we probably have a selection bias situation happening where your numbers are coming from places. For those of us that work in incident response and it takes a little bit more time, we're writing narratives. We're writing that weekly report. Mine used to come out on Thursday. It's a group of paragraphs telling how my team did, what we worked on, where we moved the ball. Well, again, back in the boardroom, looking across the table, you talk to accounting. That's what the CEO is looking for. The generally accepted accounting principles, a pretty clean 10K. You know what the structure of that report looks like. You know what the data fields need to be. You know where variance is going to come from. It's a fairly structured report. InfoSec doesn't have that. Now, make no mistake, we have no shortage. Ask any auditor or Big Four player. There's no Big Four in this room, right? Doesn't matter, I'm being recorded. Good game. They're going to tell you how to measure every aspect of your game, right? There's going to be heat maps. Pick a framework, COBIT, ITIL, ISO, anywhere you want to go, PCI, HIPAA. There's all these control sets, and there's, is it documented? Is it being repeated? How's it trending? But how does that translate into the boardroom? This gets really hard. It gets really complicated. So when we look at the flow of information, you guys know this better than I do, so I know I'm in over my head, but I'm going to make a run at it. You're familiar with the continuation of information, this continuum. It starts off highly verbose. We're going to summarize that. Data becomes information, information, knowledge. When you start to understand it, knowledge, when the pattern becomes a little more clear, we start to see elements of things repeating. You get this notion of wisdom. You're living with experience. You can kind of predict what's coming next. That's a great thing. Leading indicators, I don't know, I hate to say attack chains or kill chains, but we're trying to demilitarize this InfoSec thing. Cybersecurity is the fifth domain of warfare, I think. Not useful for us, not a great model. But what happens with this information is it goes through the stack. People hands on keyboard are writing narratives to explain their job, explain what they're working on, maybe justify their raise, that this project that they pinned their next year at this job on is progressing, providing value, return on security investment, which I will laugh about in any population except in front of you because I think you might be able to do it on some level. We spend a lot of time generating a lot of perspective, measuring a lot of things, reporting on a lot of things, and we take that to our leadership. And all the paragraphs I wrote usually got summarized into a bullet or two. My boss stopped sharing those with me because I got angry, because clearly my data was important and it was not. You get all the way to the CEO. What he hears once a year, 4 times a year, if your CSO is presenting to the board, might be 5 bullets in 5 to 15 minutes. How do we equip those individuals? We're familiar with bias in this room, far better than I am. But the one that's interesting is, for me, in product management, we refer to this as the curse of knowledge. I know what I'm talking about. The people I work with every day on this know what I'm talking about. At Black Hat, I learned that I don't know anything. Everything I looked at, everyone I talked to, they had all kinds of perspective I didn't. And when I learned something, I assumed I was the last person in the room to unlock that little nugget. When we talk to management, we have to realize that they've made a decision to depart technology. I mean, don't get me wrong, technology is important. Being correct is important. But we put technical knowledge and prowess up on a platform, don't we? Now, this may be a perverse incentive. We've spent a lot of time in this industry looking for ways to improve our management patterns, communicate better with the business, but it comes time to provide a raise for our employees. How do we do it? A job well done? A merit bonus? A please don't leave us bonus? Well, they got this new training, they implemented this new tool, they showed up for work on time, they started wearing deodorant. Or maybe they picked up a new certification that showed that level of expertise and prowess. This perverse incentive, we've continued to apply pressure on, we must be more technical. In this room, show of hands, do you consider moving into management or promotion? A handful of hands? Continuous hands, that's fair. We'll quantify that differently. How many of you think of it as a change in career path? Absolutely the camp I'm in. And sorry for those of you I kind of teased the hand out of. It's a total change in career path. You're looking at things totally differently. You're abandoning the same kind of technology that you were looking at. We've talked a lot today about uncertainty. We talked about absolute truth, which freaks me out. Uncertainty is something, when you move into management, you have to embrace. In the boardroom, which is some place that I assume all of us in this room don't spend a lot of time, they make decisions, strategic decisions, business decisions, things that alter the performance of the business and their stock on a hunch, on a gut instinct. They're going to do some due diligence, they're going to check things out, they're going to model some things, but at the end of the day, they're getting comfortable with uncertainty. That's where they operate. When you move into management, you almost have to give up this notion of being right. How important is being correct? I'm expecting you guys to throw something at me right now. I'm a little freaked out by asking, but let's explore that for a second. How important is being correct? How many of you have had a delightful, let's call it an argument? In the Jedi sense, it might have been a negotiation. Lightsabers out, and you explained it to them. This is a problem. There's serious risk. It's going to impact the business. We've had those discussions, right? Every one of us have at some point. When you go into management, you don't necessarily have all the data. The curse of knowledge has vacated you as this information's come up the stack. You don't have the full operational picture. You don't have all the data points. I liked what Mr. Hubbard said earlier, where you don't always need as much data as you thought you did, but you're operating with an impaired view. And for us, that's extremely hard. How many of you have lost sleep because someone on the internet was incorrect? That's right, one hand, the rest of you are lying. So what's interesting about this is when you go in to have that conversation with the business, you've done the business presentations, right? And you have beat the snot and tar out of everybody, making sure that you've got all the data. You roll in and you've got all the answers. And someone doesn't agree. Someone has different data. Someone has a new perspective. And how do you feel about that? You feel some kind of way, right? It's fair, you do. Now, what's interesting about that is this. As a technologist, it's our job to be correct. As a business leader, it's not about being correct. It's not about right and wrong. More than anything else, in management, it's about that relationship. It's about that partnership. It's about influence. And so when you put this thought out there, the secret, something I'm learning, I'm still learning and still struggling with, is having a point of view. It's an informed point of view. You've done analysis on it, you've checked data, you've solicited it, you've shopped it around, you've talked to other stakeholders, but you have a point of view. And when it comes time to present that and somebody tears it apart, it's your little baby. You react. When you have a point of view, it's not about you. It's not about correct. It's not about how you feel. What you're exploring is this position. And this is the best data, the best informed decision I can make. And if somebody wants to explore it or provide an opposite feedback, that's not an attack on you. It's this idea, and you're going to explore that. And so passing that emotional ownership and personification of that, you have to divorce yourself of that. And that's one of the things I think that's hardest about moving into management is carrying a point of view. How many of you have thrown vulnerability scans over the fence? Yeah, dude. Not so many years ago when most of us didn't have in-house vulnerability scanning stuff, we had consultants do it. One of the hardest things I learned back in the day when I wore my consultant cap back at Fishnet, you'd send the report over, you get that first uncomfortable phone call. I don't know what planet you're from. That's not a critical vulnerability. That is not an important system. Will you shut up, fix that, and send another copy of the report, please? It happens. We've done it. If you haven't, find a new auditor to kick in. It happens. After we have that conversation, what do you do with that report? Go into the break room and staple it up next to the material data sheets? No, we bury that report, right? It's got vulnerability information. It is sensitive, right? Legal's going to have thoughts about that, but we don't share that around. That's a treasure map to our network. Well, that does us a lot of good because now we're not talking about the vulnerabilities. How many of you are parents? All right, that's a lot of parents. Now, I don't have any kids. I have a management program going. I got married. I'm learning a lot from my wife. She's teaching me how to act like an adult. We're making progress. We just moved from San Francisco to Austin, Texas. There are more dogs in San Francisco than children, which means anybody, especially the single people in San Francisco, we're experts on parenting. Just ask us. We'll tell you how to parent better. What's interesting about that is, and here we go, there's this notion of reflection, right? When you see the child fall down, one of two very diverse action sets follow immediately. One, uh-oh, are you okay? Aw, projectile tears and the whole thing. There's the other direction. Baby falls down, kid falls down. Baby gets up, dusts himself off, and get on with whatever they were doing. A little bit later, oh, that's a little sore, let's clean it up. You know what I'm talking about? Am I way off my, okay. I think we did this, the uh-oh. And we taught the business that vulnerabilities are bad. I think we taught the world that vulnerabilities are bad. We taught people that this is dangerous to talk about and we're afraid of it. It's dirty, it's not okay. And that's interesting. We see this manifested other places, but what I think is interesting about this is by burying this and making this dangerous to talk about, we created yet another self-fulfilling prophecy. Incidents happen. In the last 6 cities I've been in, I asked a question as follows. How many of you in this room are 100% confident that your organization, your sysadmins, are the only people in complete control of your production environment? This is the first hand I've ever seen raised to that question. Now that's interesting, because it's not that we're not smart people. We're InfoSec people, right? We have clue. We think we're smarter than IT, definitely. Certainly the auditors. We're not there. The bottom line is it isn't if or when incidents happen. It's where and how. Or are you looking hard enough? Talk to me about threat intelligence. No, don't do that. Look at your logs. So there's a bias. I think we're all focused on prevention. I don't know if that's tied to regulation. I don't know if we're afraid of the uh-oh. I don't know what's happening. I'm not going to draw that conclusion yet. But we have to acknowledge this bias. Do we kind of agree on that? We're so focused on preventing the attack because that's the end of the world that we have this other thing that we're worried about. Walking the plank. If activating incident response means we've failed and we're admitting failure, we're activating the original cybersecurity insurance policy. Yeah? How many of you guys have cybersecurity insurance? This is like the people that are smart that know all the numbers, right? Most of you guys have done this or at least applied to them or gone through them. I need an answer on this. How many pages are on that form part that you fill out? Last 3 I saw were under 4 pages worth of data. One was like 5. How many pages? What's the longest form you've filled out for cybersecurity insurance? 4 pages? Any other takers? Hubbard hit something else earlier that was very interesting, talking about the value of information. We talk about our dashboards. If I asked right now, next week I'm speaking with Congress and Senate critters in DC, and I'm supposed to do a security awareness training. What topics do you think I should cover? You want to start a fight? I asked this at IC Squared Congress last week in Atlanta. Oh dear. There were only a couple things that were repeated. That's a mess, right? We're the experts. We're the practitioners. We live in this every day. We need to challenge this notion that activating its response is the end of the world. It's not necessarily the worst thing that could happen. How many of you have dealt with an interrupted website? Hard to quantify the value, right, to the business. They know exactly how much .com was generating. Not hard, simple math. They're going to tell it to you pretty fast as they're gasping running down the hallway. But we're not the only industry that deals with outages. I made it here on my 4th rebooking yesterday. And I got in before midnight, which was awesome. How many of you have dealt with the heartache that comes with the delayed Amazon Prime delivery? It's not the end of the world. The question is, how do we respond? We as the professionals need to take this on the chin and respond and own it. Who in this room owns patch deployment? Right. Who owns configurations for your production servers? Right. Database configurations and logging off those databases? No? Our job is to inform. Our job is to partner. Our job is not to do this. We don't own that. We influence it. Communication is not how articulate or correct we were. Communication is what the listener walks away with. That's why this shouldn't be walking the plank. This is a partnership. We go to them and say, hey, look, we're about to make a decision. I feel some kind of way about it in my professional experience, my knowledge, what I see happening. I think we should be somewhere more over here. But I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, because you're probably pretty smart and people that like you and consider you friendly. But we're going to work together on this. And when something happens, you go right back to that, hey, can we dial this in a little tighter? You've had this conversation in so many words. We need to accept that right out the gate. With every one of those discussions that you have on that spectrum, you're going to land in one of several places. I think when we look to what the executive, our leaders, the CISO takes into the boardroom, they answer 3 questions. And this is the same 3 questions we should start with anytime we talk with our business partners. This is the same thing I should probably ask when I try to tell my wife how my day's going or what I'm working on. What do I need to know? That's often the hard one and probably the one we spend the most time on. Directly to Hubbard's point earlier, what's the value of this information to me? More importantly, why do I care? We're not real good at that one, are we? That one's hard. And probably the most important thing, how many of you guys have done like a breach model scenario where you've pulled in PR marketing, you've pulled in legal, and you guys have literally tabletopped out an incident, a communications plan, that sort of thing. 1 hand, 2 hand, 3 hand. Okay, we got a few hands. I have to ask, and please respond, did you guys go so far as to say, look, here's the 5 points of performance we need to communicate in that breach announcement, and Mr. CIO, COO, CFO, COO, whoever it is that's going to sign off on this, are you on board and ready for this? Did anybody make the ask? You did? What happened?
Well, first they were confused by the question.
Fair enough. We need to have a mic running around. They were confused by the question. Something that I think has been lost. When the data's gone, who here in this room is the custodian or the owner of this data set? Probably none of us. So the companies, our executives, I think we failed them at a specific place. We know that when you generate intellectual property, work product, deliverables, that's corporate property, right? The email that leaves our gateway, our content. The stuff that goes out on Dropbox, maybe. The data that we gather in marketing databases for our websites, getting a little fuzzier. Social security numbers, credit card numbers, that's our data, right? All right, that should totally fall dead in this room, and it has. Mission accomplished. No, it's not ours. This notion of custodianship applies. Those of you that are parents, how would you feel if a babysitter walked in the room right now to watch your kids and said, hey, what time are you coming home? See you later. No notion of how many kids do we have? How old are they? When's the last time they ate? What's bedtime? Anything else I need to know? Do they need bathed? Custodianship is accepting responsibility and ownership of that data, knowing full well you're in a better place when you hand it off. And we've totally lost track of that. So I want to jump into what's being reported. Biases that need acknowledged here. This is not heavily quantitative. This is actually anecdotal data. In June, I spoke in 6 different cities to CSOs for a breakfast study. And we were basically talking about metrics, how to report our security programs, and the questions were asked for introduction. Who are you? Where are you from? Who do you report to? How long have you been on the job? What are the 3 best metrics you receive, and what are the 3 best metrics you report? All kinds of psychological forces in play, so this is anecdotal, wildly at best, but this is what illuminated things for me and got me started asking questions. 20% of the CSOs had been in the job for less than 12 months. The half-life for a CSO is fairly short. There's a new focus in the boardroom on security. That's not a surprise either. For whatever reason, Heartland Financial, people are bad at math. This is a lot smaller target Neiman Marcus, but they got excited about it. Timing's everything. I still don't understand what bullet 3 means, too much business, not enough security. I don't know too many CSOs that really understand the business. I love talking to CSOs in the financial sector. What business are you in finance? Well, we protect assets. You're in the business of dreams, dude. Have you looked at your sales literature? Very different. People that are in tune with the business, we need more of that in this industry. What's interesting and probably not surprising, I think it validates this, the majority of CSOs are looking for validation in their program. And so we turn to frameworks, we turn to external consultants, extremely overpaid consultants a lot of the time, to tell us how to do our jobs because they're smarter than we are. Right? All right, well, good game. So areas of focus, this is not surprising. We all report on projects. We all report on audits. Now, the audit committee is a very powerful tool and an important partner. 25% of them are reporting consistently on incident response. What percentage in your security program is the IR team, your blue team? I know several companies that they just now started blue teams. Most of them were tied to supporting DevOps or prod and making sure they just had enough logging stuff coming in and they're running down anomalies as they popped up. Half of them are reporting on vulnerability management. Yes, I work for Rapid7. Yes, they have a vulnerability scanner. That's not why I'm talking about it. I think we would all agree, fairly simple and straightforward. Having an idea of what vulnerability exposures look like, what risk you're operating and what your tolerances are, having a visibility into how you're managing your environment. This is a decent metric, but again, I don't know if it's the right metric. So if someone can use small words and explain this to me, 6% of these people are talking about how much spam was blocked, because that's an important data point in protecting a company, right? Two interesting anecdotes came out of this initial discussion. The first was obviously the argument, why are you still reporting on spam? The answer is, dude, the CEO keeps putting it back in. The obvious question is why? Please use small words and help me understand. He's like, it's the only thing he understands that we do. I got 2 spam emails in my box today. How's your golf game? Are you even coming into the office? What do you do all day over there? And this is as far as they've gotten. Like, we can't get away from it. 12% are reporting no metrics to the board. And I understand that. I can relate to that. Again, in another 900 years, we'll have this dialed in. So my heart goes out to you. But reporting a metric, getting them sold on a metric, understanding a quantity that they have internalized and are looking for means you have to stay with it. It's going to trend. And you've got to be able to back that over time. And the bottom line was that CSOs are grasping for ways that boards can relate. It's intangible to them. So affecting change. Anecdotally, because this is all anecdotes and mostly useless, how many of you have heard about bad USB? A lot of hands. Enterprise threat, serious concern right now. Our team's doing nothing but that right now. I'm in an interesting place in my career where I'm starting to get phone calls from organizations that are dealing with breaches or are looking for advice on things. And bad USB has been a huge thing over the last couple of days. And where I'm going with this thought is, Karsten Knoll, when we were approached for comment on Karsten Knoll's bad USB research at Black Hat, was, what do you think about this? What does this mean? What's the future going to hold? And my question was, has anyone actually seen what he's done yet? My hope, my aspiration, what I look for when researchers deliver new things is that they're going to provide perspective. They're going to help inform what the practitioners need to do their jobs. Hey, I broke the internet for you, high five. Not good enough? How about a tool, a JTAG, something I can analyze the firmware with, some way I can detect malice and do something about it? I mean, like, I'm definitely going to turn to the antivirus to solve this, right? I'm going to apply yesterday's technology tomorrow to sort this all out. We're not there, certainly not at scale. The bottom line is, right now, it's the boogeyman. You should just bring in aluminum foil and start lining people's hats. We're not prepared to engage bad USB. If you find it, what are you going to do? Nothing at scale is the answer. What I'm looking for, and I'm driving this to a point, every CSO I talk to reports something different to the board. And there's going to be variance. But the boards don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what to expect from us. I think in a dream state, if I could have it my way, could you imagine with all the CSOs starting work today, if they came in and the corporate directors they report to say, hey, I'm glad that you took the time to prepare this report. Before you get started, can I ask you a couple questions? You know, you've been on the job a couple of weeks. How do you feel about our current patching strategy? Like, are you comfortable with configuration management? Are you comfortable with logging and the stuff that's coming in? Is there anything we can do to make sure, like, you have what you need? Because we need you to succeed. What? Huh? The thing is, the boards don't know what we're doing. And I believe we understand the problem on different levels, and we're really great with all these different programmatic approaches to building a security program, but we can't talk about it to normal humans. I ruined my brain learning product management. I can build requirements for products that androids can read as they write their code. And my boss asks for a comment on a news story, and I send her this beautiful bulleted list. I've got the key points, supporting object lessons, like here's a little, could you just send me a sentence or two? But the data's all right here. I write a sentence literally just using the first bullet, send it back. She's like, was that so hard? I'm like, I hate you. We know what we're talking about. We're plenty smart, but we're not making it accessible. What I want to do is this, and this is honestly, I want feedback from you guys. We're going to argue about the number in a minute. I don't want to get into that just yet. What I would like to do is perform a quantitative and qualitative survey. I want to talk to 100 CSOs of a respectable size, maturity in an organization. I want to find out, what are you actually reporting to the board, to your leadership? Not because I think they've all got it figured out. There's going to be a lot of entropy. The data points are going to be spread. But I think we're going to find a certain concentration of what they consider to be key points. Maybe these are the things like spam that the board understands. Maybe there will be things that they believe are key to performance, whether that's in security or if they're still prioritizing compliance. What I'd like to do is talk to non-security executives and understand, what do you give a rip about? Several of the CSOs in this breakfast series, they went on vacation and they came back to tell this story saying, hey, I was offline for 3 weeks, and so the weekly report I sent to the executives didn't go out. Nobody saw it, and nobody said a thing. So he was smart. They were smart. They stopped sending them. Then a couple weeks later, didn't even bother preparing for the board meeting. Rolled in the door and was like, hey, so who reviewed that last report I sent out? I got some things I want to talk about. Yeah, no, we got it. Looks really good. No, sir, it didn't. I haven't sent that in 3 months. Just curious, do you care at all about what we're doing over here? We're not a profit center, and we get that. But the question is, what do they care about? So I'd like to try to marry those things up. What I would like to do is capture this data, understand what the core data points are, qualitatively, how they arrived at that, why, and try to distill that. Capture the most salient points, and map that back against the cybersecurity framework. Not because I think this is going to save the industry. I think having a framework, something that we could recommend, not just to our executives, but to like the NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors, something that they can understand as business people, not technologists, to turn and ask, look, when you get a new CSO, ask them these 4 or 5 questions. Make sure they're informing you on this. This isn't all there is to it, but this is a baseline that we can all agree you need to understand. The audit committee is going to need a little more data, but at the top line, we need to have this vision together. So agreeing on simple, just like trying to decide what security awareness bullet points need to be talked to with reps in DC. Making it simple and agreeing on that's hard to do. So I steal words from my boy Albert Einstein. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Any questions?
Ready? Who's got a question?
A couple in the back.
This is the perfect person who should have a question for you.
Oh boy.
So what do we report to the board on?
Amen. I don't know. That's the whole thing. I think that's troll bait. You want an honest answer? Well played, sir.
Was somebody else?
Ali's got a question. Yeah, he's got a question.
I think it's on.
So how are you going to pick these 100 CISOs? And are you going to look at different industries, size of organization? How are you going to plan to do that sample?
I'm not a religious man, but actually I think I am. Right now, more of a question of who I can get to talk to us. One of the things that was interesting is that, I don't know, CISOs are interesting critters. They're smart, they're very intelligent, they're clearly in leadership. They're definitely paid well, but they're afraid of being wrong. You put a bunch of CISOs in a room, put a microphone on a table and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? Crickets. So there's going to be NDAs. There's going to be some of this kind of stuff. If possible, I want to get my hands on like the actual slideware or whatever they present. But I would like to see some Fortune 1000, I'd like to see some Global 1000. I'd like to find some sexy startups, social media organizations, those sorts of things. How will that skew the data? I'm not real sure yet. There's a lot of people that know a lot more about bias than I do. My thought is this: those organizations that are mature enough to have some level of metrics, some sort of reporting, some sort of thought on risk, they'll be in a place to at least have an informed discussion of, look, I tried this, it fell flat. I tried this, it fell flat. I found this and it resonated, but I don't know if it matters. And right now, we're hungry for data. I just learned I don't need as much data as I thought. Maybe 100 is overly aspirational. And to be honest, that number came out of a hat when we said, at what point does the media get interested? Well, the answer, without hesitation from PR, was, 100. It has to be 100. So 100 is my number, but I don't know how I'm going to get there yet. Does that answer your question? It's the best I got. It totally will change. It's going to be all over the map. My idea is just to start the conversation. We're going to learn more than we want to about this. The hard part will be distilling it.
Hi. So they'll give you $20 if you get whatever the slideware is that Snapchat presents to their board. But that aside,
It's an undocumented feature set. I mean, what you do with it's not our fault, dude.
hey, we just mark it on it.
I got to be careful. We're
Just
recording
mark it
this.
on our, yeah. We won't
Yeah.
say who's asking the question. Hey, so did you decide what you're going to ask those senators and folks, or what you're going to tell them about awareness? Because you're picking some simple messages to start off with, right? Did you get agreement? What are you going to?
I certainly did not achieve what I would consider overwhelming consensus, but we do have a short list of things to think about. I do have a list. I don't have it right here handy, but we do have a short list. Fortunately, the awareness session is going to be more of an ask me anything. So I'll start off with 30 minutes of exploring these different things, talking about different scenarios. I think it's important for those in office to understand that clearly hackers put vulnerabilities into the code that they're exploiting. They need to understand the difference between a vulnerability, where they come from, what an exploit is, why patching is important, what a password is, why it works, why it doesn't. Those sorts of things. Start with fundamental thoughts. I may be going in too far. We'll see how quickly they blue screen. In the back?
Yeah, one of the questions I have, as you do this analysis, there's been sort of a trend I've noticed, and it's this. I feel like from the perspective of what we present to the board, it's actually resonating very, very well, and they get the message and the understanding. But then when you talk to regulators / auditors, excuse those that are in the room that are auditors.
Don't excuse them.
Okay, I won't. A much different perspective in terms of what you should be reporting from a board perspective. And I would just be curious if there is somewhat of a dichotomy in terms of understanding what boards are really asking for and what regulators think we ought to be presenting.
I think that's a great question. I don't want to be too coy, but I will be. I think that the dichotomy already has labels. Generally speaking, the auditors and the regulators have this notion. It's structured. They call it compliance. And the question is, do you care about compliance or security? They don't understand the difference, do they? When you fill out your cybersecurity insurance application, is it asking about security stuff or compliance things? I assure you, it's regulatory data and compliance frameworks. And one little question about, do you indemnify third parties? And beyond that, the rest is details. I think directly, we need to help get back to the fundamental of, you can be secure and be compliant on accident along the way, or you can be compliant, maybe secure in certain ways. That's kind of what this risk thing's about in my mind, is understanding that, quantifying it, trying to do something intelligent, not on accident at any point.
Oh, coming.
Please
I'm
don't
so
ask me.
immersed in what you're saying, I keep forgetting I have a job here. Sorry.
So I wonder if you'd consider adding to your list of questions the following question, and that is, dear Mr. or Ms. CISO, what does it really mean in your organization to be secure or secure enough?
I love the question. My response would be, how would I capture data other than verbatims?
What's wrong with that?
Fair enough.
I mean,
I just don't know how to distill it, but I think it's a very interesting question.
So we've spent a fair bit of time in this conference talking about definitions, thanks mainly to the gentleman right in front of us.
Lexicon matters.
Yeah, and I think that's an important question. I mean, I hear people say that, boards they want to know basically, are we secure? If not, how do we get secure?
Right.
And unless you have some contextual understanding of what those words mean, I don't know how you could give any kind of meaningful answer.
I think it's great. I think it's a great question. I would expound on that to the point where I don't know if the CISO's definition and the board's definition will necessarily achieve parity, but I think it's a great question. Email that to me. I'll put it on the list, please. We're forming a steering committee. Turns out I'm not nearly as smart as I think I am, and so I rely on people to hold me very accountable, give me great ideas so I can make it sound like I'm smarter than I am. And in all seriousness, we want to work with the steering committee to make sure that this is going to be useful. It could be a great exercise in building titanium reinforced carbon fiber mud flaps. It's a waste of time. I want this to be immediately applicable. I want this to be useful. If you started a new job or you hired someone to replace you as CSO, you trained someone to replace you, you'd want to give them a framework or a starting place. We don't need any more standards, but I think something that we could agree on to try to start with the fundamentals, I think would be a huge tool.
So I think there's actually a third party, or maybe even a fourth one in this conversation, the board and the CISO. And it's an other IT executive, whether it's the CIO. Because what I've seen is that the boards, at least right now, and I certainly don't have the breadth of experience that you do, but they're very interested in security.
I could just be armchair quarterback.
No. And the CISOs are talking to them, and they're saying lots of stuff, and the board say, ooh, whiz bang, let's do that.
Right.
And the person who really comes back and says, I don't think that's the right thing, is actually another IT executive that says, I don't think they understand what you just told them you're going to do,
Right.
and I don't think that's the right thing to do. So in this, whatever that framework is, I think it's important to consider how to communicate not just to the board, but to other IT executives.
I think that's great. One of the things we want to explore, and I will make sure that we explore this aggressively, is I want to make sure we get away from the security executive and hear from other board members, and we can prioritize the technical executives that, let's face it, have been in the boardroom longer, and people are going to be like, hey, Jen, does Radio Shack over here know what he's talking about? Does that sound sane? I think that makes really great sense.
Trey, have you thought about talking to state governments? It's a very different environment than you're going to find in most private business, but you may get to a different set of answers and a different class of answers because you're talking to executives who are sometimes appointed or otherwise just hired, but they're reporting to boards with a political stake but not a commercial and reputational stake.
That's interesting. That's a good idea.
they generally take their job of being accountable for the expenditure of tax dollars very seriously.
Right. That's really great feedback. I was talking to a couple of federal level CSOs for different groups, and no, that's actually a really great way, another place to explore. That's absolutely great feedback. Will do, if they'll talk to me. Anybody else?
Anybody else? I'm looking. Okay. Last question of the day for Trey.
Be nice.
So how do we engage? Okay, I'm on the bad side because I'm one of the auditors in the group, so I'm sorry.
Totally necessary. Thank you for being here.
So how do we engage? How do we change the message? Because we deliver audit reports as opposed to board presentations. How do we engage chief audit executives to present the right information that maybe takes the data from your analysis, makes the change to our communication model, so we're not SOX, PCI driven and go back to auditing security, which we kind of used to do at one point in time.
Right. I'm going to try not to go all Akbar. It's a trap. Sorry. I'm like, okay, this is a really great question. So back when I was first getting started in IT and I was doing auditing and I was a lot smarter than I am now, I would go in and tell people how to do their jobs, right? I would go around like, look, the best practice is this, dog. Like, why can't you do this? Because you clearly like it. Have you not been on the internet? Let me help you internet and then work. I still have a baby face. My attempt at a beard's trying to hide that. I got tuned up. These people were extremely smart. And I learned very quickly that my most effective engagements were those where I would ask, why are we doing this? Because it would seem to the outside that the best practice looks like this, and you're clearly not retarded and are functionally, engaging, paying taxes, these sorts of positive behaviors. So you arrived at this conclusion on purpose. Help me understand why. And very quickly, I started learning how things really happen in the real world, outside the lab, outside of the compliance framework I lived in. We remapped. So this is back at Fishnet. We remapped PCI and other frameworks back against like an Octave risk analysis model. Flow-based analysis, started asking business decisions. There's residual risk. There's like issues with this. We don't have to pay to secure it if we don't have it anymore, right? Obvious questions. So the idea of taking that back to the cybersecurity framework, I don't want to use it as a panacea, but I would exhort you to consider that starting with asset discovery, because clearly, we all know where all the data is in the company. And we all know, they always bring security in when they acquire a company or new technology. Like, we don't know anything inside of our enterprises. So the discovery problem, it's important. But if you look at it, it's the IR lifecycle, right? Identify, discover, prevent, or prepare, detect, contain, eradicate, like recover, this loop. I would bring it back to that. I think it's very common sense oriented. And I think driving that conversation back towards, if we get breached, we failed. It's a problem, but our job is to be professional, detect it quickly, elegantly contain it, communicate it, saying, hey, we're big boys and girls. We can handle this. You can still trust us. We're partners.
Have you seen an opportunity where audit and security do joint presentations on some of this? I mean, how do we be a partner to the process as opposed to a sniper?
Totally fair. There's a number of different ways to argue this because there's this notion of separation of duties, separation of controls, right? Left hand, right hand. At the same time, you're looking for a sanity check. And so it may be that, look, we found this, we saw this as a deficiency, security explored this. I mean, maybe this is asking too much. Maybe the audit partner is literally saying, look, this is something we're monitoring. This is a non-standard approach. We think it's clever. We think they're onto something there, but we're going to keep an eye on it. And maybe there's this notion of trust. Something that we've not done a good job of, in my opinion, in this industry is trust. User awareness training, because you're stupid lemmings. No, you are trusted custodians. You're our partner. We can't live on your laptop. We expect you to do things and be aware. You are responsible for this data. We trust you. We need to partner with you. We're going to do what we can to help make that easier. But at the end of the day, we can't prevent you from turning malicious or these sorts of things. So at some point, you've got a partner. You've got to have that trust. Then again, I'm also a bit altruist. I'm really sorry for that.
If you don't learn to trust and maybe laugh a little bit, you will go crazy.
Fair enough. I think I'm over time, guys. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.